Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. After 20 years of war in Afghanistan, U.S. President Joe Biden says it's finally time to bring American troops home. The U.S. military estimates that it has completed more than half of its withdrawal, and the remainder are expected to depart by September the 11th. But the withdrawal of the U.S. troops has sparked fears that Afghanistan's civil war could intensify and spiral out of control. A UN report released this month warned the Taliban are strengthening their military posture in Afghanistan. Civilians have been killed in a string of attacks since May the 1st, when the United States formally began its withdrawal. So, as violence continues, what is the future for the war-torn country? What is China's role in the post-U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan? For more, let's loop in our panelists. And I'm glad to be joined in Kabul. Mushtaq Rahim, independent political and security analyst in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in London, Mark Bowden, Associate Fellow of the International Security Program at Chatham House and also former UN Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General to Afghanistan. Joining us in Berlin, Dr. Markus Keim, Senior Fellow at the International Security Division of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Last but not least, we also have in Brussels, Claude Moniguet, CEO and co-founder of the European Strategic Intelligence and Security Center. That is a strategic analysis agency based in Brussels. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Rahim, I want to start by asking your analysis of the latest situation on the ground.
Well, right now, the situation is quite fragile. The Taliban have had a significant offensive across the country, which has resulted in falling of so many districts in different parts of the country and retreat of the national security forces. This leaves the Afghan people in a state of bother, from a sense that the war activities, the military activities have been spiking, and there is violence across the country. The Taliban have been marching forward, and this is a situation where everybody is concerned and not sure about the future or course of action in regard to the Afghan security.
How do common Afghans, seeing the leaving of the American troops and those of NATO forces, after all, they invaded Afghanistan, but at the same time, they were saying that they tried to establish and help with the Afghan forces and the order of the country. But common people, what do they make of this?
You have to differentiate between the different segments of the society in terms of talking about analyzing the American invasion of Afghanistan. There is a certain group of people, they believe that the Americans are leaving or the international forces are leaving without providing a foundation for the peace process to succeed, and they're leaving Afghanistan in a state of uncertainty, where peace process remains in limbo and there is no immediate prospect of success in the peace process. Also, there is a segment of the society that believes that the withdrawal of the international forces creates ground for the intra-Afghan talks, and potentially that challenges the legitimacy of insurgency in the country and allows the different Afghan groups to talk to each other and look for solution. But in the end, my personal conclusion is that the international forces are leaving without making any effort to allow the peace process to ripe and proceed further.
Now, my last question, there has been a lot of discussions about Afghanistan, what's next. Different countries play different roles. China was also trying to offer some kind of support by creating an ambience of peace talks between different factors of Afghan society. Now, tell me more, Mr. Rahim, how do people see these efforts, and what do common Afghans see China playing its role in the region?
Well, the role of the regional actors is significantly important, and particularly the two major nations who can play a very important role in the Afghan peace process. That includes Russia and China. And of course, Beijing has always been seen as a source that can play a stabilizing role in the region, and particularly in Afghanistan. I think there is a lot of space to improve further. The expectation is that China can play a very important role in terms of managing the regional dynamics of the Afghan peace process, particularly those elements who are playing proxy politics in the Afghan state, and as such, playing the balancing act, helping the facilitation of the peace process, trying to neutralize the spoiling elements of the region, particularly state actors, and the Afghans really look forward to. I was talking to some senior former government officials and political leadership in Kabul a fortnight ago, and the discussion was that the Chinese government and Russian government will have to come forward for the broader sake of the region, but of course playing their role as a regional serious actors to help in the Afghan peace process.
Mr. Rahim, things are changing very fast on the ground in Afghanistan. I know the Chinese embassy are warning the Chinese nationals in Afghanistan to leave as soon as possible because there is quite dangerous situation after we have seen 20 years almost of the U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. But let's see. Our best wishes to your country, of course, and also your people. Thank you so much, Mr. Rahim. And now let's bring in our other guests coming from different parts of the world. Mr. Bolden, of course, things are changing very fast on the ground in Afghanistan. What is your biggest worry?
I think my biggest worry is the collapse of the government to some extent, and the formation of disparate groups against the Taliban.
How is the Taliban growing, and how is it related to the exit of the U.S. troops there?
Well, I think the Taliban is seeking to gain control over a number of districts, and their control of the country has increased. So far, they haven't attempted to attack the larger cities. But the Taliban have also developed a stronger sense of their own governance of areas as well, creating stronger administrative structures, getting more control over the population, developing, I think, areas of interest around places like Kandahar, Lashkar and Kunduz, which are a major concern to them. So I think there's a general increase in the strength of the Taliban.
Mm-hmm. Sir, you were earlier serving as the UN Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for Afghanistan. Describe to us what were the situations then and how it evolved to where it is today. What is your analysis?
Well, in some ways, much has remained the same. It's just that we're seeing a greater progression. The Taliban, when I was there, I left in 2017,
yes,
were already controlling a large number of districts, but hadn't actually formed as coherent a sense of governance as they have now. The war was described, I think, as a hurting stalemate at the time I was there, but I think that stalemate has continued. What we've seen is greater and continued losses of the Afghan security forces since I've left, which makes the stalemate rather more difficult to maintain. What I think we've also seen, and what is a particular worry at the moment, is the very high dependence that Afghanistan has on international assistance and external aid. And that's going to be a real struggle to maintain into the future. And it's, I think, is an issue that threatens the security of the country as well. There's a very, very high dependence on not just military assistance, but also development assistance, and the services of the country are almost entirely dependent on international support.
Now, we are seeing that the U.S. troops is trying to have its total exit out of the Afghanistan. To what extent do you see that the international community will be able to figure out a way of Afghanistan next stage? Mr. Keim.
I think the international community does not play a major role in the next years to come. Domestic politics will be crucial and pivotal. I mean, I don't want to be unfair, but at the end of the day, the international community, led by the United Nations, led by NATO, has lost patience with Afghanistan. And that's the main reason for the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. It's about domestic politics in all the Western states which participated in the military operation. And one way or the other, by withdrawing, the international community, or in particular NATO, the West, so to speak, loses leverage. And I think I fully understand that currently everybody emphasizes, every Western leader emphasizes that we will not leave Afghanistan alone, that we will continue support, in particular development assistance. But I think in a couple of months, the attention will turn away from Afghanistan, and what's going to happen there will not be in the headlines of the Western media anymore.
Interesting. But that is only about the attention. In reality, on the ground, it's going to be probably even more worrisome. We hope not, but hard to say. Dr. Keim, though, I want to follow up because Germany has been playing an instrumental role in Afghanistan, particularly with the questions many have regarding the Americans. Germany has been having strong presence and also stable presence in Afghanistan. Tell me more about what does it mean for German politics and how the German public is looking at the role that Germany is playing right now.
You're absolutely right. Germany participated almost from the beginning in the military invasion of Afghanistan, and German soldiers are still in Afghanistan. They are only, I think, almost the last to leave,
yes,
together with the Americans. I think there's a sigh of relief in the German public and among the political class, because Germany participates in this military endeavor for more than 20 years, and it has been more than a military endeavor. Germany has been heavily involved in development support, development assistance for Afghanistan, and the German public wants to see results, and the results in terms of security, in terms of prosperity, in terms of development are more or less meager, and therefore the German political class somehow has lost interest. And the interesting thing is the Afghanistan experience totally transforms the German armed forces, which have not been used to do war fighting in a hostile environment for 70 years.
Right.
And this experience in Afghanistan transformed the whole German armed forces.
Let's move on to Mr. Monique, joining us from Brussels. Of course, the European Union's role is an interesting one. You have countries like Germany, which has been playing quite an instrumental role throughout the process, while others are playing different roles at different times. What is your analysis of the European Union, and what's next now since the Americans are likely to move out?
I don't have great expectation on the role European Union could play in Afghanistan, actually. As you know, some countries, for instance, France, Belgium, and others, and Germany, were involved in the operation in Afghanistan for years. But we registered important military results, but absolutely no positive political results. And the question is there. We have no expectation of stabilization of Afghanistan in the future, in the next future, and certainly not after the withdrawal of the NATO troops. So I think that Europe will be extremely cautious, and for instance, a lot of embassies, European embassies in Afghanistan are already preparing to close their doors and to act from outside Afghanistan, because it will be just impossible to work there.
So overall, after talking all of these different perspectives, gentlemen, what kind of operation should we characterize the war in Afghanistan and the following up years until now? We see a country that was invaded by the United States and some Western countries at the very beginning, and now after some kinds of peaceful periods in the country, it is now once again falling back into chaos. And yet those that were in the country now are losing their patience. How would you characterize the overall years that we have seen, past 20 years almost, of what's going on in Afghanistan? Mr. Monique, we want to start with you.
We saw it from a few months now, since the announcement of the withdrawal. It's clear that the situation in Afghanistan after September 11, or even earlier, will be worse than it is now. Since a few weeks, we've seen a large offensive of the Taliban in various provinces and districts in Afghanistan, and this military pressure of the Taliban will increase.
Yeah.
Today, they are both playing the military game, winning field day after day, and saying that everything they will build something, an Islamic state which will be livable for everyone. But very clearly, we have a great experience with the Taliban, and we know exactly what will be the state they will build. So clearly, I think that cannot have extremely great expectation on a bright future for Afghanistan.
Is it a failure? Let me just put it in a blunt way and a direct way. Dr. Keim.
If you compare the different goals which have been pursued in Afghanistan, the first goal has been pursued quite successfully, counterterrorism, to drive out Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan, to defeat Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. With the second goal, the international community has more or less failed to create reliable, effective, loyal security forces which provide security on the whole territory of Afghanistan. And when we look into the future, I'm not sure what to expect. Maybe some kind of civil war like back in the 1990s. At least some power struggling between the Taliban and the legitimate government in Kabul. And what really concerns me most is that our hope, our expectation that the security forces would be loyal to the government have failed or have been disappointed. What we see in the last couple of weeks and days is that Afghan security forces simply switch sides, surrender, and do not fight properly. And this is the biggest disappointment for all the respective efforts of NATO.
I think we need to look at it in two different scenarios. First of all, I think that there have been some changes in the Taliban. Whether these are cosmetic or not, I think remains to be seen. But I think there is a recognition in some of the Taliban and the political leadership that there will continue to be a dependence on international assistance and support. And I think that needs to be built on in terms of further leverage in terms of discussion. There have been achievements, particularly in terms of improved health, improved education, and other areas. And I would hope that in any peace process, these issues are brought forward. On the security side, I think that the challenges are in having built up in actually the failure of the Afghanistan security forces. But I think that what we're likely to see over the future is not, I suspect, an immediate collapse, but more a retreat to the big cities and an increasing rural-urban divide. I mean, I think this is going to be slower than people think, and we need to put more emphasis on recognizing and continuing pressure for the peace talks.
You talk about the failure of the Afghan security forces, and yet Others believe it is exactly because of the big powers' interference in Afghanistan that the security forces are relying on the big powers. And also there has not been a systematic building up of Afghan governing themselves in a successful way. What do you make of that, Dr. Kaim? Do you agree with Mr. Bowden, or you have a very different view?
I agree that with the international community more or less failing or maybe not failing, but it could not provide the results which it aimed to provide, meaning in terms of security, the creation of effective security forces, what we have hoped and expected, and it was modeled according to the West, the central government providing security in Afghanistan. And maybe this was part of the, or that was considered to be part of the long-term stabilization of Afghanistan. What we did not consider properly is that Afghanistan is built differently like Western central states. We have different ethnic tribes, we have different religious allegiances, and therefore what we have seen is exactly what we feared, that the security forces did not follow the orders of the central government in Afghanistan anymore, but was turning their attention more to their local tribes, their local leaders, and if they switch the sides and this power struggle between the Taliban and the central government of Afghani, they follow.
Mr. Monique, I didn't want to, and I don't want to reach into quick conclusions about A or B, but there were already early warnings about foreign forces occupying a country with an invasion, and then even sometimes with good intention, it would not be able to help that country to systematically build a governance system that would be able to endure the challenges of the country after the foreign forces leaves. So do you see we are seeing once again history being repeated in this case?
I think that the occupation of Afghanistan was, and the war in Afghanistan, the second war in Afghanistan, was something which it was impossible, of course, to avoid it after September 11 in 2001, because Afghanistan refuses to deliver the Bin Laden and his associates. The idea to destroy Al-Qaeda and to destroy the terrorist organization and to weaken and to suppress the Taliban regime was not so bad and was a success. But after the idea that we had to construct a modern state, democratic with our Western value in Afghanistan, it was a concept which is void for most of the Afghan people. As it was said before by one of our friends today, the loyalty in Afghanistan goes to the tribe, goes to the clan. It doesn't go to the state.
I see.
The state is something which is outside the meaning of the average Afghan people. And maybe I will finish with this. The problem of the security forces in Afghanistan today is that they are clearly, with some exception, they are clearly collapsing. We have seen it in a lot of places in the last week. They don't want to, or they can't fight to defend and support the government. And in the future, they will certainly not be able to conduct large counter-terrorist operations inside the country, and certainly not against the Taliban. They will maybe for a time, for a few months, for 1 or 2 years, be able to protect the Kabul. And even in Kabul, in the last 2 weeks, we have seen attacks on the Hazara community.
Right.
So the protection is weak, but I don't think that they will be able to have great achievement in the fight against terror, and certainly not in the fight against the Taliban.
I want to thank the three of you joining us from different perspectives, recounting what happened over the past 20 years and whether the so-called goals have been achieved. Thank you so much, Mr. Bowden, Mr. Kaim, and Mr. Monique. Really appreciate it.